समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
We are talking about the latest between Armenia and Azerbaijan. That was another sort of protracted conflicts where there is a turn towards the peace. And let me get you started with this visual. So see this on your screen. We haven't made it. Our graphics team hasn't made it. The White House has put it up. So you see Donald Trump on one side, the Nobel Prize medal on the other. And in the middle, you have the names of the governments that have recommended him for the Nobel Prize. All of these are governments who've given Donald Trump the credit to bring about peace in some conflict situation. You can see this list mentions president of so-and-so, prime minister of so-and-so, foreign minister of so-and-so. They are very cautious where they mention Pakistan. They just say government of Pakistan because they know that if they say prime minister of Pakistan, doesn't count for very much, I'm now guessing. And if they say Field Marshal Asim Munir, that will be a bit awkward for the Prime Minister of Pakistan. So only in the case of Pakistan, it says government of Pakistan. Everywhere it says some authority, prime minister, president, foreign minister of that country. So what is he doing? He's now padding up his case for the Nobel Peace Prize. Ever since Obama got it, I think Trump has had a bee in his bonnet about the Peace Prize. He wants it now. And he thinks now with this latest joint declaration between Azerbaijan president and strongman Ilham Aliyev, so strong, he's been there for 22 years. And uske pehle jante ho mera baap kaun tha? His father. So Aliyev dynasty has ruled Azerbaijan since 1993. This one has been there for 22 years. So he signed, and then on the other side, Nikol Pashinyan, the Prime Minister of Armenia. Armenia has elections. Prime ministers lose power. After the last war, there was a change of government because Armenia lost that war. There were protests on the streets and in parliament. It's a different kind of society and country. However, both have signed a joint declaration right now, suspending all hostilities and giving up claims on each other's territory. However, their territorial disputes are not yet settled. So they'll be engaging in negotiations and sorting those things out. They have very complex disputes that we'll talk about for a couple of minutes as we go ahead. In fact, I will also share with you the link for Cut the Clutter episode 580. That's almost 5 years ago. In COVID months, it was recorded from my terrace, so you can see those bougainvilleas in the back in full bloom. That is what explains the history, geography, geopolitics, geostrategic location of this region and the territories over which the two countries have been fighting, the most prominent of which has been Nagorno-Karabakh. Nagorno-Karabakh was a territory that belonged to Azerbaijan. Internationally, it was accepted that it belonged to Azerbaijan. Its population, however, was almost entirely Armenian. And that's how the Armenians had it in their control. In these two wars, 2020 and 2023, the Azeris defeated the Armenians. In an earlier war, more than 30 years back, in 1992 to 94, Armenia had defeated Azeris because Azeri army at that point, although it was much bigger, Azerbaijan is more than thrice the size. The population is more than thrice the size. Population and the area is more than thrice the size of Armenia. But in that earlier war, because Armenians had a better organized, more professional army, they had defeated the Azeris. Azeris were waiting. Meanwhile, they were building up their own army and building their alliances. And one of the big alliances that they built in that period was with Turkey. And Turkey then became the big supporter of Azerbaijan, not for free. It sold them Bayraktar drones and more. And similarly, Azerbaijan is a secular country. Azerbaijan is constitutionally secular. It is fully Islamic, 96.5% Muslim, about 2.5% Christians. Of the Muslim population, 85% are Shia. So this is the second largest Shia population by percentage of the country, Iran being the first. This percentage is higher even than in Iraq. Yet, Azerbaijan had no problem also buying the drones from Israel. So the drones that were used to knock out Armenia's radars, for example, were the same Harop and Harpy drones that India recently used to knock out Pakistan's radars. Azerbaijan, therefore, prepared itself by getting stuff from Turkey, getting stuff from Israel, and finally defeated Armenia and captured Nagorno-Karabakh. Nagorno-Karabakh is what you might call an exclave. Now, what is an exclave? An enclave, we know. An enclave is when you have something just across one area. For example, if you look at the India-Pakistan borders, Hussainiwala is where the Samadhi of Bhagat Singh, Rajguru and Sukhdev, the memorial is located. That is across the river, across the Satluj river. So while Indian mainland is on this side, across the river, India has an enclave. Similarly, the Pakistanis have some enclaves across the river on our side. Those are enclaves or enclaves. Exclaves a region which a country might own or which may be part of a larger country, but are geographically very far from that country. So in a way, Nagorno-Karabakh was an exclave, not fully technically an exclave because there was a corridor available to Armenia to reach there, but still like an exclave. Similarly, Azerbaijanis have an exclave which is sort of sitting in the underbelly or below the underbelly of Armenia. That is Nakhchivan. It's about 5,000 something square kilometers. Not that large, but not that small either. Population of about 4.6 lakhs. The problem is that between Azerbaijan is a sizable country. Azerbaijan is a country about 80,000 something square kilometers, about the size of West Bengal, the state of West Bengal. Armenia, as I told you, is about 1/3, so just a little more than the state of Meghalaya in India. Between Azerbaijan and Nakhchivan lies territory of Armenia. So for Azerbaijan to reach another part of its own country, it either has to go to Armenia, but if it's at war with Armenia or in a warlike situation with Armenia, it can't go there through Armenia. So it goes there through Iran. It goes through Iran or then through Turkey, and it becomes a very roundabout route. Similarly, if you see Turkey, there are many preeminent powers in that region. The two most populous, most powerful, civilizational Islamic states, that is Turkey and Iran, are located right here. And both of them have interests and clashing interests in a region that is called South Caucasus. We know the Caucasus Mountains. On the southern side is mostly Asian. As you go over the top to the northern side, that is where Europe begins, and that's why this region is called Eurasian region. Now, Turkey and Azerbaijan have a very close relationship because people of Azerbaijan are also of Turkic extraction. In fact, many of the stans, as you go further east from there, many of these stans, what the Americans call as stans, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, there is a strong Turkic influence there. So Turkey needs to reach Azerbaijan. So far, because they could not go through Armenia, they built a railway and a route through Georgia. See where Georgia is. Georgia is fully in Europe. Armenia is fully in Asia. Azerbaijan is almost fully in Asia. Also, some parts of Azerbaijan in North Caucasus do fall in Europe. That's not very different from Turkey. Most of Turkey is in Asia, but a small part of Turkey falls in Europe. Classical Eurasia. This is the definition of Eurasia. That is where these disputes are. Now, what has happened now? Nagorno-Karabakh is one thing. Both sides have said that they're giving up claims on each other's territory. That's one thing. This agreement, why is Trump in this agreement? Trump is into this agreement because Trump will always want the American presence everywhere, maybe some American commercial gain, and who knows, some commercial gain for some real estate business connected with him as well. So who's the one who's been going and talking to the Azerbaijanis in this case? That is Steve Witkoff. Usual suspect, he's also been working between the US, the Middle East. He's been flying in and out of Moscow, talking to Putin. He's the one who set up this summit now, which is taking place in Alaska. His son floated that crypto company, World Liberty Financial, where Trump's son holds a majority equity, and which in turn has this Pakistani general's son-in-law, Bilal bin Saqib, as an advisor. I'm just giving you a recap. Bilal bin Saqib has been appointed advisor on crypto by Pakistan government in the rank of a minister. Is just about 35 years old, and he's been the key to this Pakistani warming up to America. So Steve Witkoff's son with him, Zach Witkoff, who has named his son also Don, right? So Donald Sr., Donald Jr., his son, who has majority equity in World Liberty Financial, and Steve Witkoff's son, Zach Witkoff, who runs World Liberty Financial. He's connected there. So I'm giving you this complex story because it's my job to declutter complex stories, to tell you how everything is connected. So what is it that Trump has thrown in here by way of, you can say, American commercial interest? Trump would say that he's only doing it because if he creates American commercial interest, that guarantees security, and that also guarantees that both sides stick by whatever has been decided. Remember, he has done something similar with Zelensky also, because after first humiliating and insulting him in the White House, then later his people reached out and they did their critical minerals deal. And what did Trump say? Trump and his people say to explain that, they said, look, why does Ukraine need security guarantees now? Because once our companies are there, because critical minerals are in the areas which are sort of in the middle of the two battle lines, where the two forces are. So if our companies are working there, obviously the Russians will not come and mess with them because they know that these are American interests. This is the way Donald Trump has now created a new kind of diplomacy and a new kind of peacemaking where rent becomes a part of the deal. So this is rent-seeking peacemaking. What is the rent-seeking element now between little Armenia, 30 lakh population, and a little Azerbaijan, which is 1 crore population? That is a tiny corridor. See on your map. This tiny corridor of 43 kilometers, this will have a highway, this will have railways, this will have oil and gas pipelines, this will have optic fiber cables, just 43 kilometers, about 7 miles. This is called Zangezur corridor. Why Zangezur? Zangezur was a name given to this region in 1868 after Tsarist conquests, right? So this, let's call it, different countries have different names, but I'd say the most popular name is Zangezur. The most recent conflagration between Azerbaijan and Armenia had taken place in the same region which falls in Armenia's Sunik state. And this corridor will start from Azerbaijan, cut through the Sunik province. You can see how narrow this area is, and go to Nakhchivan. Once it goes to Nakhchivan, that tiny exclave of Azerbaijan, just see how geostrategically this is located. That has a border with Iran, that has a border with Turkey, and that has very easy access to Georgia. So what happens then? Right now, because Turkey needed to reach Azerbaijan, Turkey had built this railway that goes from Kars in Turkey and goes up north and west, then goes to Tbilisi, which is the capital of Georgia, and then turns around and then comes into Baku. That is about 344 kilometers longer through the mountains than going through Nakhchivan. Because once this corridor is built, then Turkey has a much faster direct access into the Turkic heartland, that is Azerbaijan, and then onwards. Now that is something that worries Iran. If you see this corridor, and I'm not saying this rhetorically, if you see this little corridor, when this comes up, what will happen? Number one, Iran will think that their strategic footprint in the region has been weakened, because Remember, Iran has a long border with Azerbaijan. The province of Iran bordering Azerbaijan here is called Eastern Azerbaijan. Its capital is Tabriz. That is where Iran's former prime minister had crashed in his plane and died. That is the area. Iran had built a corridor through its own territory coming in from Azerbaijan and going to Nakhchivan. Now that will become irrelevant, and also Turkey will acquire more importance. So just this 43-kilometer corridor, what will it do? It has got Iranians feeling insecure. It's got the Turkish feeling victorious. It's got the Azeris feeling victorious. It's got the Armenians believing that, okay, they might have conceded something, but they will probably get peace by now because they are the smallest state. They are a very small country. It's got the Russians feeling marginalized. So just as the Iranians feel marginalized, the Russians feel marginalized because Russians are already playing their games in Georgia. They don't have a contiguous border with Armenia, but they have a contiguous border with Georgia, where they have created two sort of autonomous republics of the kind they've done in Ukraine, that is Donetsk and Luhansk. So there also they have South Ossetia and Abkhazia, which were parts of Georgia, but the Russians now have a foothold there. It was the Russians who actually were guarantors for Armenia's security. They failed at that because they were also distracted with Ukraine. They failed at that. They were not able to stop Azerbaijan. Because of that, the Russians have lost their dadagiri in what used to be their own home base. Because 1919, as the Tsarist Empire ended, the revolutionary government rose in the Soviet Union. After the Bolshevik Revolution, the First World War ended, and around the time the First World War ended, the Ottoman Empire also ended, got liquidated. In that process, many countries came into being and many were grabbed. In that process, everybody agreed that Azerbaijan and Armenia, the Soviet Union will have. So both of these became republics of the Soviet Union. That's why historically Russia has felt, as the successor state of the Soviet Union, which it believes it is, this is their strategic backyard. They should have a strong foothold there. That has now been marginalized. So Russians should be worried. Just till the other day, Iranians were fighting with the Russians. Although they are allies, Russia is using Iranian ammunition, missiles and Iranian Shahed drones by the thousands. And yet the Iranians had argued with the Russians when the Russians supported the creation of a corridor of this kind, because Iranians thought that they will lose their own presence or their own strategic importance or their own strategic leverage in the region. This is where, so now what have I told you? Iranians now feel cut out of the deal and marginalized. The Turks feel that they are rising because Erdogan and Trump also have a very good relationship, and the Turks are always there to make a deal. They also help the Americans in the Middle East, they help them with the Kurds, they help them with all kinds of things in Syria, Libya, every place. Similarly, they will help the Americans in this deal as well. So the Turks think that they have risen, Azeris think they have won, Armenians think, oh, finally there is some respite. Iranians think they are marginalized. Russians are definitely marginalized. But the most important thing I haven't told you, which is that if this happens, hello, wake up. Iranians will suddenly realize that they share a border with America. What am I saying? Because this corridor, which will be created, if it's created, the Zangezur corridor, the arrangement is, and you can obviously guess what it's going to be called. It will be called TRIP. What does it stand for? Trump Route for International Peace and Prosperity. And Trump said, I really like this name. It will be land leased by the Americans for 99 years, which pretty much amounts to the same thing as buying land. That is how they worked in Diego Garcia, for example, like a long lease. So 99-year lease to the Americans. They will sublease it to a consortium of contractors who will develop infrastructure, etc., and then charge revenue on this. All revenue, this will be governed by Armenian laws. All revenue on this will be divided between the Armenians, between the new contractors, etc. Armenia will get the larger part of the revenue. And just for clarity, Diego Garcia, because Mauritius used to be a British colony, right? It is the British who acquired it on lease and have given it to the Americans because those two powers worked together as allies. We had featured the issue in a full CTC, of which I am sharing a link with you. However, because the land will be subleased and it will be running right next to Iran's borders, Iran will then have physical American presence along Iran's northwestern borders, and these are very sensitive territories. And that's a very sensitive region for Iran as well, because Iranians have always worried that the Israelis and the Americans, they work together. Iran also has troubled relationships in the Islamic world because of the Shia-Sunni issue as well. They see many of the countries in the Islamic world, the Gulfis, for example, as being too close to the Americans. They see the expansion of the Abraham Accords. And all of that, the Iranians see as undermining their power. Now, the last thing they want is Americans in their neighborhood. And that's the reason we've seen a quick reaction from the Iranian government. So Ali Akbar Velayati, who's well known in India because he used to be a frequent visitor to India, he said there'll be a firm response. We will not accept it. However, it does look like there is quite a bit of momentum here. We will see Russia, Iran, etc. Russia is now really caught up on the Ukrainian side. I think Putin is busy sorting out or figuring out what he can get from Trump just later this week. So Russia's being distracted has helped America in this case. And it has also enabled America to establish a foothold in the very heart of Eurasia, which they've never had through history.